How's it going, everyone? My name is Daryl. I hope everyone's having a great semester so far. Today, I am presenting New Zealand and the traditional Maori diet versus modern diet. Let's go ahead and start with some New Zealand history first. So with the Maori people, they were the first to discover New Zealand and live on New Zealand between 1200 AD and 1300 AD. The voyage after that was led by Abel Tasman in 1642, who was a Dutchman and actually gave New Zealand its name. 127 years later, British lands on New Zealand led by James Cook, and they were the first European to settle on New Zealand, compared to Abel Tasman, who was the first European Dutchman to discover New Zealand. And now we're going to go ahead and get into some geography. So the geography of New Zealand, it is located in the Oceania, specifically the Southern Pacific Ocean. This is very close by or near Polynesia. It is also southeast of Australia, and New Zealand is part of a region called Australasia that is also part of Australia. And seeing the geography of New Zealand, knowing that it is near Australia, it does mean that it is closer to the equator, and this plays a role in the climate of New Zealand and how the people cultivated food. So the climate of New Zealand is actually pretty unpredictable. Well, as far as in the north, it is warm and tropical, and in the south, it's very cool. And during the winter times in the south, it can be as cold as negative 10 degrees Celsius. But year round, the weather is pretty mild. There's moderate rain, and also there is an abundance of sunshine. Now on to some Maori history. So like I mentioned in the New Zealand history slide, the first inhabitants of New Zealand were the Maori people, who were led by Kupe 1,000 years ago. And they were originally thought to be from the islands of Hawaii, an island or a group of islands in the South Pacific Ocean, closer to Polynesia. And you actually can't find Hawaii on the map or any map. The Maori people were actually known to be natural gatherers and hunters. This played a great role in them coming over to New Zealand because they were able to cultivate food that was essential and nutritious to them that would not harm their bodies at all. And with them being natural gatherers and hunters, they were actually able to live off of New Zealand and the foods that it had to offer to them. Now on to a traditional Maori diet, which was very vegetarian-like. They ate a lot of kumara, which is sweet potato. They ate taro, and cabbage, and also fern roots. The kumara, taro, and cabbage, they actually brought over from Hawaii. And the fern roots was actually grown in New Zealand. The kumara, taro, and cabbage, those are very difficult for them to grow in New Zealand because of the conditions and climate that New Zealand has. It just wouldn't grow the right way that they were accustomed to. So they had a lot of trial and error in growing and harvesting those kinds of food. But having a vegetarian diet did prevent many illnesses to the Maori people because it contained a lot of antioxidants, essential fatty acids, and a surplus of vitamin C and other minerals. Such a healthy diet, it actually helped them become better gatherers and hunters, as it kept them lean, it kept them strong, and it kept them energized to keep going throughout the day, unlike having such a high meat content diet to where it slows you down, to where it would have slowed them down. If they would have added a high meat diet back in the day, it probably would have resulted in longer chronic diseases. The Maoris eventually did change their diet and added seafood to their diet because, one, vegetables that they wanted to grow simply wasn't growing efficiently, and it just took too long due to the conditions and climate of New Zealand. So they added shellfish, crabs, crayfish, eels, and barracuda, to which all are good in high oil content, or they have good fats. And they also added wood pigeon and tui to their diet, which are high in protein, specifically lean protein. And it amazed me that they knew that they had to have a good protein diet as well as a good fatty food source to kind of balance out the protein and the fats. Because if you have too much protein, too much lean protein, it causes protein poison. And to me, it was just amazing that how they kind of knew that. It was also cool that they created a fish calendar, and this was for them to know which fish to catch during the month. So people who lived on the coast obviously ate way more fish than the people who lived inland and into the forest, as they would have had more veggies, berries, and things like that. But they would have eventually traded when it was time. Now let's take a look at the Maori diet after James Cook's arrival. So during his arrival, he introduced pigs, poultry, cows, horse, sheep, and goats to the Maoris, as well as carrots, potatoes, and corn. These made the Maori diet more carbful and more high in protein and more high in trans and saturated fats as well. Bringing over of these animals weren't actually that bad in terms of population for the Maoris. It stopped cannibalism, as one of the elders mentioned in one of the sources that I have. The elders and nutritionists of the Maori believe that the bringing of these animals made the Maori people lazy, because now they weren't really hunting as much. They were more farmers, and with the gathering of food, they were just able to plant it close to their home. Another thing that changed was the people who would cook at big gatherings or festivals. Usually it'd be the Maori elders, but ever since it has been younger people who have a certification or qualified by law. So now actually a bunch of the Maori elders are a little bit disappointed that the younger people have taken over to cook. Now on to modern Maori diet. The modern Maori diet consists of more meat than veggies, which is cooked in more fat and contains more additives that make you crave the food more and increases your hunger levels. So that means you'll be much more hungrier often, and it'll allow you to go ahead and consume these processed foods and meats more often. Now, as you see here, it is hanji. Hanji is a cooking style which food is cooked by steaming underground. They actually used to do this back in the day, but now health officials are telling people to stay away from hanji because it is comprised of more meat than vegetables. And with these meats are high in fat, so obviously they're trying to decrease the consumption of trans fats and saturated fats that come from these meats. I have also included the pictures of McDonald's and Burger King because this is probably the most common thing that is in New Zealand among the Maori people, as stated by health officials in one of my resources. And they have stated that they eat more processed foods and fast foods than normal grocery foods. Why? They do it because it's easier to purchase and it's much cheaper. If you do not know, I certainly did not know, the Maori people are very much in poverty. This is why they go ahead and eat more processed foods or fast foods, because like I said, it's cheaper, it's easy, and they don't have to do much for it. With such high consumptions of processed foods and fast foods, it results in high cholesterol, heart disease, and diabetes. There's actually a statement that I saw where 50% or more of the Maori population are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, while 250,000 people in New Zealand are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So with this alarming rate and statistic, the Maori people or the elderlies and health officials and nutritionists are actually trying to combat this by planting more vegetable gardens and eating out less and promoting healthier eating by having more vegetables on your plate, reducing the consumptions of trans fats and saturated fats. That is all that I have for the presentation and the take on traditional Maori diet versus modern Maori diet. I hope you guys enjoyed and have a great rest of the semester.